Hello everyone, and welcome to another Pixel Game Maker tutorial. Today's video we're going to go over the save and loading system that is built into Pixel Game Maker. And so as you can see, I picked up 3 gems here. They've showed up on the HUD, and I will be able to save them. And then we'll be able to say restart the game so that we're back at a new game. And we'll be able to load and be able to have the player be exactly where they were, as well as have the gems collected that they needed. Okay, now this is going to go into a lot of depth because we're going to just see exactly what is available for our save and loading. And then hopefully other videos, I'll get to high score systems and Zelda-like save load systems, and we'll go from there. But we do need a basis of how this works, and it's actually extremely flexible. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so the first thing you'll notice is that you're not going to be able to see my whole editor this video. And that is because we are primarily going to be using the debug menu. So I wanted you to be able to see these options a little easier. And the reason we're using the debug menu is because you can actually perform all the save and loading options you need from the debug menu. And so this isn't going to be a video of how to set up visual scripting to get the actions and stuff. That will come in later videos. This is purely just showing you what options we have for save and load and how to use them in our debug menu, because you can use this through your playtest and it's just as useful. Okay, so let's get started. First, we're going to find where we have access to these options. Where is our save and load stuff? And they are all in the resource tab, and they're under switches and variables. And remember, these switches and variables under the resource tab, these are kind of like your global variables. These can be accessed from any scene and stuff like that. Now, these save and load switches, they behave differently than other switches. For instance, some you can turn on and you don't have to turn off. They turn off automatically. Some turn on automatically and you don't have to mess with them at all. You can just strictly use them for checks, condition checks. So let's go over each of these options here, and we'll start in the switches because you saw an example of this right at the beginning of the game. And the first one that we'll go over is the save file switch. All right. And here in the notes, it just briefly says save game data to the specified slot. All right. And then it even goes further. The file slot used is set by the file slot variable. Okay. So right away, the definition gives us that we also need to be thinking about a variable called file slot. And I'll just show you that real quick. Variable, file slot. All right. Now let's keep going because I want to just show you the thing that I did at the beginning of the video here. The second option is just the load file, and this will load the game data from the specified slot. So the file slot used is set by the file slot variable. So again, we're messing with this file slot variable. All right, so let's play test here and get acquainted with these a little bit. So in the beginning of the video, I picked up, a couple gems, and you saw me click save, but nothing remained on. It literally just turned on and turned off. And that's how that switch behaves. It turns on and off. And the load file, you saw the same thing. When I clicked on load file, for instance, let me just do this again here. Click on save, you'll see that it didn't even really flash, it just instantly off. I bet if I could move faster, you'd see it turn on and off. And now if I clicked, again, like I reset the game, new game here, and then I load, you'll see that it did the same thing. And I can click it as many times. So now let's go down here to our variables, because remember, it's based off the file slot. And if I scroll down, we can find our file slot, and we see that it was saved in file slot 0. Okay. So this is how we can change our file slot destination. All right, so we could change it to 1, and then we could save there. And actually, what we could do is pick up another gem, and we could save it onto file slot 1. And now if we went to file slot 0 and we clicked load game, we'll see that that gem was not picked up. However, if we go to file slot 1 and then we load the game, we'll see that we did pick that gem up. All right. So we're starting to see here a pattern. You can set a file slot and then you can save and load that file slot. All right, now it gets even cooler than this. Let's close out of this for now. And let's see, one thing that we need to go over before we go over the rest of these is where do these file slots go? Where can you access this data from? And the first option that we have is we can go to File, we can go to Open Project Folder, and we can see that we have a save folder. Now, this save folder will not exist if you have not saved at all in your playtest. But once you save initially, this folder will pop up and you can delete it, you can get rid of it, and it will get rid of your save file, but it will create a new save folder. So don't think you have to keep this. And now you can see that we have two files here. We have a play_0 and a play_1. And as you can guess, those are associated with the file slots that we set. Remember that first game was file slot 0, and the second game, or the first time I saved was file slot 0. The second time I saved was file slot 1. All right. Now we can actually delete these as well. So I'll just delete them from right here, and we can try to play test. And we can see that if I go down here to file slot 0 and try to load the game, now it has nothing to load. And the same with file slot 1, I have nothing to load. So next we're going to go over where you can find your save files in a built game. And so if you are to build a game here, you'll see that you have an option right here called Create Save Data in the same folder as game data. So if you have this option selected and you click OK, after you build, you'll get something like this. And so if you clicked into your, usually you build into the documents output folder, and then you'll just have a bunch of files right here. I already had one set up for the summer jam that we just got done with. And so inside of here, here's how your output folder will actually look. And so if you go to the main folder and resources, you'll see that there is a save folder here. Now this again will not be there if you haven't already saved in this game. So by default, when you build a game, there will be no save. I just wanted to show you that it will be here. And then you'll see that there is a file slot here for this particular one, file slot 99. And so that is, if you click that option again, that's where you'll find the folder, the save folder. Now, let's say that you didn't click that folder or that option. Where would you find it? And so the next one is going to be in your cdisk local or users, username, app data, local. And this is where you're going to get a huge list of other games even that have save data. And let's see some ones that are here from Pixel Game Maker games. Let's look. We have Block Slime Puzzle Cave. That's from the contest from March. We have Timothy and the Tower of Mew. Volleyverse from the Summer Jam. So this is where your folder will be if you do not select that option on a build. And you can see that there's a save folder and it has your save slot. All right, so if you need access to that, again, I'll show you how to get there from just from default here. You'd click on My PC, you go to Local, you'd go to Users, your username. Now from here, you can't access the app data. So if you come over here and you click backslash, I think it is, app data, and you press enter, you'll be able to go into here, click local, and then there's where you can find the game that you're looking for. Hellcat Live, and there we go. Okay, so that's how you would access from built games. Before we move on, I want to go over the pros and cons from selecting this option for where your game data is saved. By having this option on, it looks like it's going to be the best option, because especially like people coming from RPG Maker, they're used to the save folder being inside their project. And while I do feel that the benefit of this option is having it more easily accessed because it's in that main folder. Well, they still kind of have to search for a little bit, but it's more easily accessed inside that project folder. The benefit from not having it selected is that, say the user is to delete your game and then a few weeks later, whatever, they want to continue the game, but they don't want to start over. They want to go from where they left off, but they already deleted the project folder, so they just open up another one real quick and then dive right in. If you have this option not selected, then most likely they're still going to have their save data, because most likely they didn't delete it from that kind of hidden area in the app data local. So that's what I feel is the biggest benefit. Now, with that said, you guys can make your decision on that. All right, so let's move on and let's go back to our switches here. So we've covered save file and we know now where the save file goes. We've covered load file and we know now where that file is that it's loading from. Now let's go down to delete file. We'll come back up to copy file, but let's go to delete file. And I just want to show you that from the editor or from your action, your visual scripting, this is how you can delete a file from in your game. So let's go down, and I can't remember if we have a save file or not. We do. It's 0. So let's load 0, which should be default. Yep. So if we load 0, we picked up 1 gem. Now we're still in file slot 0. We've loaded it, but now I'm going to delete it. All right. And so if it's not going to delete your progress, but if we were to start a new game, restart, and if I was to be on file slot 0 and click load file, now it doesn't exist. And matter of fact, we can go to the save folder and that file is gone. All right, so and how you would call something like this is you would just go to, say, wherever you're calling it from. You would just go to change switch, you would call a common, and this is where you would call the delete file. All right, this is also where you would call the other ones, save load, and stuff like that. Okay, you'd call them from change switch variable. All right, so now back into it. Let's go to this next one called check file. All right, now this is a very useful one. This one is, by the way, delete file is going to be a turn on and then it automatically turns off. That's how it's going to behave. So now let's go to check file. Now this one is going to behave different. This one is going to behave, it's going to turn on automatically if the condition is met. So if we read this, it says, if the specified slot contains game data, this will set to on. It sets to off if there is no data, and it automatically updates based on the file slot variable. So we never have to set this check file. We don't really even have access to it, but we can use it for condition checks. Is check file on? Is check file off? Okay, so let's see this in the playtest. And right now we should not have any save files, that's correct. And so we can come down here and see check file, and we can see that it's not on. We can see that we can't turn it on, nothing will happen. So if we go down to our file slot, and let's change it to 1 here. Let's grab a gem, and let's save our game. So we have created a file. And now let's come down here and we can see that check file is now on. And again, we can't do anything with it. We can't turn it off if we want. All right, so now let's restart the game, and you can see that check file is off. Now the reason check file is off is because file slot reset to 0 and our file slot was 1. So now if we were to change our file slot to 1, we'll see that check file turns on. So that's how you can check your file. Now, check file doesn't adjust as far as 1.0.5.1 goes. Check file will not adjust as far as setting variables like this. So what I actually had to do to get that was I had to go into the objects and say when I press A that it will change the variable common file slot to equal 1. So then when we were in here and we go down to check file and we go to file slot, when I press A, it went to 1, check file turned off. If I was to make another action that said to reverse it, or actually if I just went like this, if I said instead of equal 1, if I said plus 1, so we're just adding every time I press A, and then I make a unconditional link back, we can see that it will adjust accordingly. So check file is off, file slot is 0, I press A, check file is on, I press A and it will go up to 2, and check file will turn off. Because there's no file in 2, there's only a file in 1. And this is really useful because we can now use this as a check. So if, say we made a filter action here, and let's just say that we added a filter, apply filter, let's just do noise, something easy. We can say that we want it to go to this filter. We can click other conditions. We can click on a switch or variable change, and we can say if the check file is on. So if check file is on, it will then filter. And we can test this. So if we go down here, we see check file is off, file slot is 1. If I press A, we will see that check file is on and the check rang true. So that is how we can use that in our logic. All right, so I will go ahead and delete that check and the action. We don't need that. And we'll go back to resources. And now let's go to the copy file. And so this says copies the game data in the specified file slot to a target. The source is set by the file slot variable. The target is set by the destination file slot variable. All right, so now we have another variable to go over. Let's go to the variables here. And we see that right underneath file slot, we have designated file slot. And this is really it. As far as the variables go, we just have the file slot, designated file slot. And so the designated file slot is basically the destination of the copy. Okay, it's not the file that you're copying or saving or loading from. It's the destination of a copy only. All right, so if we set this up here, we can play test, and we can see here we have copy, and that's really all we need. Well, we might want to check our check file as well. And I can't remember if we have, we have save file 1. All right, so we're going to go up to 1 again by pressing A. We'll see that check file rings true. And now I want to put this, I want to copy this data to file slot 2. All right, so I'm going to add, or I'm just going to put destination file slot to 2. And then we're going to come up here and we're going to click copy. And now if we check our folder, we see that we have now a file slot 2. And if we were to add 1 to file slot 2, you'll see that check file is still active. So that means that there is a file slot there. And then if we click load game, we'll be able to have the same data we would have if we were in file slot 1. We can test this by resetting the game, going to file slot 1, check file is true, so it's there, and load, and we get the exact same data. All right, so that is how you copy a file. All right, so we've gone over all the variables and the switches associated with save load. And by now you're probably seeing how you can use these to manipulate your menus into checking if there's a file. If there is, then you can load that file slot and stuff like that. There is 2 more things I want to go over. One is going to be a alternative method to load that is actually going to be more flexible than load, but we're not going to get into the full details, unfortunately, in this video. And that is called the runtime action. It's going to be called load a file. Okay, so we're going to click that. And I'm just going to have everything by default. And I'm just going to mention that this is exactly like load a file switch. So with all of these options selected, it is exactly like load a file switch, turning that on. All right. The only difference is by default with all these checked is that you can actually set a sequence for transitioning. So we could do let's do a slide up, okay? And we can set the duration. And so it's going to do a slide up of the loaded file, all right? And these other options, these will be covered in another video. These are actually how you can manipulate data to have global save files, to have Zelda-like slot systems where you can be from your title screen and see progress of your current file slots that have data in them. All right, but these again, we'll have to go over them in another video. For now, I just wanted to show you that by default, this does exactly what load switch does, but it just can add a little sequence to it. So I'm going to hit OK. And one thing that we do have to consider, and this is hopefully just a 1.5.1 thing, 1.0.5.1 version, is sometimes if you can see that we're changing the switch to file slot 1, and you might not be able to see that there. There we go. You can see that we're changing the file slot here, and then we're loading a file instantly. And whether we're loading a file or loading it as far as turning on a switch, in 1.0.5, we need to add a small wait, okay? Like 0.05 is what I found to work the best. And you're going to need to add that in between the file slot and the load a file. And this is true for this little wait is kind of true for anything. If you're going to save, like say we were going to save right here by saying common save file and say that we didn't have load a file, we would still want that wait in between, because what can happen is the file slot might not change. There's a little delay when you're loading the data through these variables, and so you might not, as far as 1.0.5, you might not be able to catch the right file slot before it saves, and you might actually save on the last file slot that was. All right, but I'm going to get rid of that. We're just going to show this load file example for our last one here. Bring that in. Play test. And again, this is when I press A, it's going to load the file. So I press A, and you can see that it did the slide up. That's really all I was trying to show, is that it has the sequence by default as an extra. All right, so that was it as far as load a file goes. You can see that we can go into another scene here, and we can collect some more of these stars. And we can go to file slot 1, we can save, we can load file slot 2, and we can go back down to file slot 1, and we can load file slot 1. So you can just see that this system is really flexible, and it's cool because you can do this during playtests. You don't have to have your logic set up or anything like that. But let's show one example of how you could use this. And so I'm going to close out of here. And I've set up an example here in the gems of this would be kind of like your save load system where you're selecting between some file slots, just based off your input. You're selecting between some file slots, and now you want to see if you can actually load that game. So what's going to happen here is in this area, this will be the image that is selectable, right? And so when you press A, you will then go to check for file 1. And so you're going to set the common variable to be file slot equals 1. And then you're going to run a couple checks. You're going to say, first, is check file on? If it is, then you're going to proceed to turn on the load file. And that's how you would select that file slot. And then the other check over here would be that if check file is off, because that would mean that there is no, remember when you change the file slot, that check file turns automatically on or off depending on if you have a file there. If it's off, then it's going to go no file and go right back to select slot 1. Now you didn't need this no file. This was just purely for ease of visualization. You can actually just do this. You can make the link directly back to the file slot. So now if we go to file slot 2, it's the same thing, except for on this one, we're checking for file slot 2. So we changed it to 2. And then in this case, if check file is on, we're going to load it, but we're going to use it through load a file. Again, it does the exact same thing. So that is one method that how to load. You could figure out with this same type of a method how to delete or how to copy, or this is just the general idea of what's going on. So I hope this video made sense. I hope it really dove in, into great detail with the save load system, because it's actually super flexible. It's actually one of my favorite features of Pixel Game Maker. You go to other engines like, even Unity or Godot or Game Maker Studio, you're just like, how do you save? And you have to do it pretty custom to get good results and a lot of code. But here we go. We have a nice system through Pixel Game Maker that's just through a couple switches and variables and one runtime action, and we have a ton of flexibility. So stay tuned for more. Like I said, I'm working on a Zelda-like. Hopefully that will be released soon, and there'll be videos associated on how I set it up as well. So it won't just be an asset for you. And yeah, we'll go from there. We'll see you at the next video.